Hi everyone, it's Harry. So today, as promised, I'll go over some of the numbers that came out once at the end of January. As expected, as discussed over a few of the last vlogs, the Trump or U.S. tariffs that have come, that people have been sitting on the fence have come through. Obviously, 10% on energy products and 25% on all other Canadian imports. So this will have a huge dampening effect on the economy. People have been sitting on the fence waiting for the official announcement. Apparently, it will happen likely Tuesday now, when everything comes into effect. He made announcements on Saturday, so it's not boding well for the Canadian economy in its totality. But what did the January numbers show us? The January numbers show us people were sitting on a fence. Basically, the January overall numbers kind of mirror the December numbers. Our average pricing for all housing was about $605,000. Year over year, it's about a 6.6% increase. But what we saw was we're still in that on the cusp of a balanced market. It's still 2.5 months, so we're still in a seller's market overall. And essentially, all the categories are in that seller's market, with the exception of the apartment condos, where you're in the high end of the balanced market or even into the buyer's market. I would call it a buyer's market given the amount of inventory versus sales, because we're at about 3.5 months in that case, right on the cusp. But it's not so much that there's a lack of supply. In fact, supply's up. But what we have is a lack of demand because everyone's sitting on the fence again, waiting for the U.S. tariffs. And if you look at the detached story, we're down a little bit. We're down probably 2% from from December, and which was on par for the average for the rest of the year. So 2-3% down because people have been sitting on the fence. And in January, I was expecting an uptick if we weren't for these U.S. tariffs. But our sales are down 8% from last year, where the inventory is up. We're still at 2.2 months, so our seller's market prices are up about 9% year over year. But this doesn't bode well, obviously. Uh, I'm hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if all these tariff trade wars happen, I was forever saying that we were in a recession, although people say it's not even a technical recession where you have 2 quarters of declining GDP, but we had 6 quarters of declining GDP per capita. In my books, that's a recession. I know other people have different definitions, but given with these tariff wars, I expect our GDP to fall and inflation to increase. I also expect that the Bank of Canada won't be dropping interest rates because tariffs, by their nature, are inflationary. And you'd think they they would they would they call stop all these increase. They would loosen the the money fund, but that's not going to happen because with with inflation on the rise, they loosen the interest rates even more. Inflation would continue onward, and we don't need inflation going back up to 8%. But I'm pretty sure the inflation is there. But on the bad side about it is our GDP's fall will likely fall because of these interest rates. So I'm afraid we're headed into this recession. I know I've been stumbling a little bit here, but it's a hard thing to fathom and to really tell everyone. If you're a buyer, you're basically and your job is secure. It's probably not a bad time to buy. As I said earlier, prices are sticky going up, and quick going up and sticky coming down. So it might be a month or so before we start to see some of those effects. If you're a seller, and you're getting the reasonable amount of money for whatever property you're selling, accept the offer. You can hold out, but if the person doesn't continue on the counter offers, you might be left holding the bag. In other words, there's more downward force on pricing. And if you don't have to sell, I hate to say it, but if you're contemplating it, but you don't have to sell immediately because of financial issues, or if you're a builder, you need to sell product, I would suggest you're into a state where you have to wait a year, 6 months to a year, to ever think about selling, because I think there's gonna be downward pressure on the overall Canadian real estate market to the tune of 5 to 10%. I'm expecting 5, but it could be as bad as 10 if it gets really onerous. And I'm talking about the Calgary market more than the Toronto and Vancouver markets. I have empathy for those folks because the industries that are impacted there are going to be at 25%. So we're in for some interesting times. If you've got a secure job, good opportunity to buy. If you can afford to wait on the selling, wait a year, 6 months to a year. If you need to sell right away, and don't be hard on the numbers, because there's no guarantees the current level will last. Hopefully, this gives you some of my thoughts from a real estate. It's not a pleasant news story, but we live in interesting times. Otherwise, have a great upcoming new year. Hopefully, everything in your life will be secure and there's no issues.